Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers. And it's a great role to be in, is being a mother and a grandmother and so forth. I know we all love our mothers, and so many of our mothers has done so much for us, and we wouldn't be where we are in our life, I think, sometimes if it wasn't for a mother's love and what a mother has shown to us. Sister Darlene is gone. She's gone to a graduation of her granddaughter down in Denton, Texas. So she left it with me this morning, so I've got to do more than one duty today. So I'm going to be talking this morning since it's Mother's Day. I'll also, in my sermon today, if Lord willing, I'll be talking about mothers and so forth. But I want to start out with giving just a little bit of history about how the beginning of Mother's Day took place. And so, did you know that the idea for Mother's Day was born in a small Methodist church in Grafton, West Virginia? That's where the original thoughts of it was. It was in 1876. That was somewhere along close to probably the end of the Civil War, after the Civil War was done, I think. Isn't that somewhere along in there when the Civil War was or ended? And the nation was still mourning the Civil War dead. While teaching a memorial lesson, Mrs. Anna Reeves Jarvis thought of mothers who had lost their sons. She prayed that one day there could be a memorial service or Memorial Day for mothers. The prayer made a deep impression on one of Mrs. Jarvis's 11 children. She had children. Wouldn't you like to be a mother of 11 children? You know, that would be a special thing because each child is a little different. No child is alike. And so each one of them has their special needs. Each one of them has a special situation. So she was a mother of 11 children, it says. Young Anna had seen her mother's efforts to hold the war spirit community and the church together. As she grew into an adulthood, the young woman kept Mrs. Jarvis' dream in her heart. On the day of her mother's death, Anna was determined to establish Mother's Day in her honor. On May the 12th, 1907, a local observance was held which later spread to Philadelphia. By 1910, Mother's Day was celebrated in 45 states, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Canada, and Mexico. Elated, Mrs. Jarvis told a friend, "Where it will end must be left for the future to tell. That it will circle the globe now seems certain." Then on May the 8th, 1914, President Wilson, I guess that would be Woodrow Wilson, designated the second Sunday in May as Mother's Day for displaying the American flag and for the public expressions of love and reverence for the mothers of the country. Mother's Day is a very important day. It is to honor our mothers, and we should honor them every day. A child without a mother is like a door without a knob. That's an old Jewish proverb. Let me say that again. A child without a mother is like a door without a knob. You can't go through that door without a knob or some way of getting in, and our mothers are always there to look out on our behalf. You know, mothers they love, it doesn't matter what that child looks like. If it's the most beautiful child in the world or if it's the most ugliest child. Mamas still love. They still love. They don't care. Mamas are always there to protect and look out for the behalf of their children. You know, I remember the story that I heard many years ago about this farmer that had a chicken house. It had caught on fire, and it burnt completely to the ground. Well, in the process of all this, his chickens that was inside the chicken house burned up also, and they were destroyed, and they were killed. Well, as he walked through this, where the barn used to be, he came up on this chicken that was burned up and sitting there, and he just kind of took his foot and he kicked it, and all of a sudden, out from under it ran all these little baby chickens. The mama gave its life, laid right there, sat right on top of those little baby chicks, protecting it from whatever was coming, or for the fire that was coming its way. And that's the part of a mother. Mother always wants to protect, even if their child is wrong in what they've done or if they've messed up. Mothers still want to protect. Isn't that a blessing that we have wonderful, wonderful mothers? In Exodus, the 20th chapter and the 12th verse says, "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land with which the Lord thy God giveth thee." Honor your mother brings benefits into your life when you honor your mother. I know many of you. I know some of your mothers. I remember Dina Sue's. I got to where I was calling you Dina instead of Dina Sue. I've known her as Dina Sue all my life because I've known her from the day I was born, I guess. Anyway, I remember her mother and the loving kindness, she showed towards her family and her children. And the thing about Frankie, she was a prayer warrior. She prayed for her family. She cared about her family. And I was corresponding one time on Facebook or something with I think it was with Dana. And she talked about missing, Frankie and everything about that, and missing those prayers. I said, those prayers that Frankie would prayed for you and prayed for all the family are still going up around the throne of God. They are not going away. They're still there. So mothers, never forget to continue to pray for your children. It doesn't matter what condition they're in. They may be in prison. They may be in jail. They may be far from where they need to be. But always pray for that child and love that child irregardless of what they may do. But we're to honor. We're to honor our mothers. And it brings long life. That's one of the benefits. It brings long life. If you want to live a long life, honor both your father and your mother. Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter and 16th verse says, "Honor thy father and thy mother as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee." This is a commandment of God, to love your father and love your mother as I commanded you, that the days may be prolonged, or your days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. The blessings of God will follow you everywhere. The blessings of mothers that they pray upon their children. It is good and will be with you in every land or every place. Wherever you go, you can outrun your mother's love. You can outrun your mother's prayers that they have for you. I know this for a fact because my mother's love and my mother's prayers have followed me for 69 years today. I know that all those prayers, as I just said about Sister Frankie, I know all those prayers were going up before the throne of God. Honoring your mother is not just in the Old Testament, it's also in the New Testament. I was reading Old Testament scriptures a few moments ago. Well, in Ephesians, the 6th chapter, and the 2nd verse says, "Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise." What promise did it give? If you honor your mother and your father, what promise does that give? Long life. If you want to live long, honor your parents. You know, one of the signs of the last days before Jesus comes back, and I believe with everything in me that Jesus is coming soon. And one of the signs that the Word of God gives us in Matthew 24 is rebellion and disobedience to parents. We are seeing it like never before. Why are we having so many problems in our schools? Why is there so many things taking place? Why do children try to hurt other children? Why did they try to hurt adults? It's because of the rebellion that has come into this earth. And a lot of that is because some mother has sat down on her job and has not done her job to teach that child the right direction, the right path to go. Always remember, and I'm not just talking to you here, I'm talking to those on Facebook, and also we're on YouTube now. In case you don't know it, you can go on YouTube and look us up. I'm talking to all of those. A mother is very important in the life of the children. And so I believe as mothers go, so does the direction of the world we live in today. But disobedience to parents and unthankful and holy. 2 Timothy 3:2 says that this is what will be taking place in the latter days. Being disobedient to parents, unthankful and unholy. Proverbs 1:8 says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." You know, sometimes mothers, they'd lay a law down, and we thought maybe we could get by with a little bit more with our mothers. I know when I was a kid, I would be acting out or doing something wrong, and my mother, she was always a very easygoing person. I think I only seen her upset one time, mad. She only got mad at me one time that I ever really actually remember. And I don't even know what I did that time. I can't remember that. But anyways, I remember I would be acting up. My dad would be out on the farm working somewhere. You know, the funny thing about it, when somebody would come along and my mother had to fill out a paper, they asked her what her occupation was. She was a housewife. That's what she was. She was a housewife. Nowadays, it takes two to try to financially make everything work out. Two, husband and wife both working. But she was a housewife. But anyway, my dad would be out working. My mother would be taking care of the home. She'd be taking care of all the things that mothers have to take care of, cleaning the house. And, you know, every summer, my dad would plant a garden, and my mother would gather it, and she would can. She'd can those green beans. I remember those Blue Lake. She fed us green beans till I could almost turn into a green bean sometimes. She would put onions in them. She'd put cheese in them. She'd do whatever she could to try to get us to eat the things. But, you know, they kind of got tiresome eating green beans. Of course, my dad also, he would kill a beef every year, and we'd have beef also to eat along with it. I ate more of that than I did the green beans. And my doctor a few years ago told me that's why I had diverticulitis. It's because I didn't eat enough fiber. I ate too much of the other stuff. But my mother was always there at home taking care of things. I remember coming home, riding the old yellow school bus home, and she would be bake bread. You know how she'd bake bread? Y'all remember those metal Crisco cans that Crisco shortening came in? She would take those once she's used all the Crisco out of it, and she would make that. She'd use that to put her bread in it and let it rise, and then she'd cook it in that pan. And it, you know, it would rise up above it about so high above it, and it'd be nice and brown. And I'd get home and I'd smell that bread, and it would be so good. And I can remember those days of coming home, and she'd have something for us. She knew I'd spend a day at school. You know, back in that day, there wasn't no free lunches in school. The kids didn't get free lunches. And we didn't have the money for my parents to pay for the lunch tickets. And so my mother, every morning, we had chickens. And every morning, my mother would get up and scramble eggs and make me scrambled egg sandwiches. How many had scrambled egg sandwiches? I ate a many scrambled egg sandwiches at school. But that's what we would have. And you know, back in those days, nowadays they try to put all the kids together, and one doesn't know that the other's not got the money to pay for the lunch and so forth. They keep it separate. Well, back in those days, us kids, we had to go off and eat at a different place because we had our lunch pails. And it was actually sometimes it seemed a little embarrassing that we were separated. You know, I think they've gone too far on the other side of things, but still yet that's probably a good change that they put everybody together. Nobody knows what's what on who's getting a free lunch and who's not, and so forth. But anyway, my mother always knew that when I got home, I was going to be hungry. So she had something usually prepared for me. I remember I was talking to my children here recently, and they would go home a lot of times to my mother in the afternoon. And my son could talk my mother into driving the 10 or 12 miles from out there in the country, clear to town, just to get him something that he wanted in town. And he knew how to work her when it come to those things. But mothers, they don't care. I mean, even though they're put out by what they have to do, it may be extra trouble, may be extra problems, yet mothers care so much that they're willing to do it all. Just like the hen setting up on those chickens, those baby chickens, she was willing to die to save her children. And any good mother is in that same place, that they would give their life. They would give their life for their very children and the sake of their very children. Disobedience reaps terrible results. Matthew 15:4 said, "For God commanded, saying, Honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death." He that curseth. Did y'all know that's in the Bible? If you curse your mother or your dad, it says you may let him die the death for cursing. You know, sometimes fathers and mothers don't always do things perfect in life. And we have to continue to love them regardless of what they did, not curse them. Leviticus 20:9, it says this, "For everyone that curseth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. He that curseth his father or his mother, his blood shall be upon him." God places a big emphasis upon mothers, upon parents, and their important role. The problem is we're living in a world where parents, mothers especially, maybe, and you know, we have so many homes that there's just only a mother. The father's Johnny Appleseed. He's come along, left his seed, and he's gone on and planted another tree on down the road. That happens over and over. I see it constantly. I see that constantly going on, and that's the kind of world we live in. God will honor children that honor their mother. Love and care for your mother. Proverbs 23:22, "Hearken unto thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old." You know, Jesus is our perfect example of that. When he was hanging on the cross, Jesus looked down and seen John out there. And you know, his mother followed him all the way. I'll be talking probably a little bit more about that in my sermon to come. But all the way, I'm sure she was probably at the trials when they were trying him, you know, and brought him before the accusers and everything he went through. I can imagine the pain that Mary went through. seeing the suffering of our son Jesus. She knew that he was a special, because the angel had spoken unto her and told her that this thing that you have, this is going to be the Son of God. You're going to bring about the Son of God. And I can imagine her standing there. I'm sure she was crying. What mother wouldn't be that really loved her child was crying as she looked up at Jesus. And she seen him hanging on the cross, and the blood coming from his hands and from his feet, and all the pain and agony he had gone through before that. I know she had to have been crying and in sorrow herself, but she followed him clear unto the end. And that was true love for his mother. It says not to despise our mothers when they get old. You know, I never left my mother. I stayed right here in Tulia. I decided that I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave Tulia. You know, of course, it wasn't looking like the desert it was here a while back when I made those decisions. But I made the decision I was going to stay. I was going to stay with the family farm, and I was going to do that. Then when I was 25, my dad died suddenly of a massive heart attack and left my mother behind. My mother was 59 years old at that time. And at that point and place, I basically had to step up and help start taking care of my mother, help make decisions. And you know, as she got older, the load got to be heavier and heavier of what I had to do for her and take care of her and look and make sure, you know, she was well taken care of. There wasn't any problems. I in the last 5 to 10 years, I would go to the store and I'd buy her groceries for her and take them to her, and whatever she had need of, that was what I would do. And then right up to the very end, I continued taking care of my mother because it was, you know, this was important to me. I know one day she said to me, she said, I hate for you to have to do this. I hate for you to have to do all these things. And I said to her, I said, Mama, I didn't call her mother, I didn't call her mom or whatever. It was Mama. I said, Mama, I said, you took care of me all them years. It's my turn to take care of you. And that's what happens. Roles change. And you know, when we get older, our children become the mothers, the fathers. And we take a reverse role. Sometimes as a parent, it's hard to give that place up. You know, that's what I was so thankful. My mother was never a stubborn person as far as those type of things. When I told her this is how things needed to be, she accepted it immediately. Never argued with me about anything. I remember when she came to the end of her days. I was working in Amarillo on my son-in-law and daughter's house. They were selling it and buying another house, and there were some odds and ends that we had to go in. And being I did that type of work of working on houses and stuff, I went to help them. And there was a few spots in the cracks in the wall or whatever I had to patch and try to fix. And I got this call from the nurse that would go by and check on her ever so, I don't know how often it was now, every other day or something, like maybe every day, I don't recall. But I got a nurse and that called. She was 90, my mother was 90 years old at this time. We just celebrated her 90th birthday in October. And I got a call, and she said, I can't get her oxygen level up. She'd been on oxygen for quite a while. She never smoked in her life, never did anything like that. But in her latter years, she had to go on oxygen continuously for several years. And she said, I can't get her oxygen level up. She said, I'm not sure what to do. And so she said, I think I'm going to have to send her to the hospital. I said, well, go ahead. I said, get the ambulance. I said, as soon as I can get there, finish up what I'm doing, I said, I'll get there. And so they'd sent her on, and the doctor had brought her in, x-rayed her chest, and when I got there, she called me and she said, let me show you what's going on with your mother. And her heart was all fluids all around, built up around her heart. And she told me, she said, she's dying. She's dying. And so I went back to my mother and I said, do you want to know? I know that you want to know what's going on. She said, yes. And I told her, I said, Cynthia says you're dying because of what's going on with your heart. There's nothing they can do for this. There's nothing, and that's why your oxygen level won't come up. We began to talk, and my mother began to tell me about how that, when she went to heaven, how she's going to tell my dad about the things I was doing, how I kept the farm together and kept that was his dream, to the farm to stay in the family. And of course, I'm the third generation since 1908 that's on this farm. And she started talking about seeing him in heaven, seeing other ones in heaven. My brother had died before she did, and seeing Glenn in heaven and so forth. And so we had quite a conversation. And I said to my mother, I said, Mama, I think I'm going to preach your funeral. She said, oh, you won't be able to. And I basically didn't argue with her. I just left it there. And when that day finally came, I knew that's what I had to do. God just touched me with His anointing. He anointed my heart, He anointed my mind and my spirit. And I stood right here behind this pulpit with my mother laying in a casket in front of me, and began to preach about my mother, preach a funeral about my mother, and how much that she meant to me. And as I began to think, God helped me all the way through. I only broke up once, and my sister Brenda that has passed away, and her husband and I was doing we did all the singing because she loved our singing. And so during the time that we had the slideshow of pictures of her and things going on, we were singing. We were singing because she wanted a lot of songs. I don't have many songs that day. But I turned and looked back at the video. It wasn't on this screen, it was on the wall. We didn't have screens at that time. And I broke up for a few moments at that time. But I brought a sermon from Proverbs, the 31st chapter, beginning in the 10th verse. It's called, Solomon wrote these words, and it's called the perfect wife, or the perfect mother, you might say. Let me read this morning, and maybe make a few comments as I go through it. It says, how hard is it to find the perfect wife? She is worth far more than jewels. Her husband depends on her. He will never be poor. And I know my dad depended upon my mother. He found a jewel when he found her. And things weren't always perfect. All marriages, you're going to have some little arguments every so often. But most of the time, my mother, she didn't say much. My dad did most of the arguing. But he found the perfect wife when he found my mother. They were only married before he died 29 years as the years that they had together. Says her husband depends on her. He will never be poor because of her. You know, I've seen some mothers, wives, spend every dime the husband can make. I'm not putting women down by no means. I'm just, the husband does the same thing a lot of times. But I've seen these things happen, and that was not my mother. She was looking out on behalf of everything. We didn't have much. We were poor and didn't have much. It said he will never be poor. We weren't poor spiritually, physically, mentally. We didn't have a whole lot of money. We made it every day. 12th verse says she does good for her husband all of her life. She never causes him trouble. What a good wife. She's always gathering wool and flax, enjoys making things with her hands. Now I'm reading this from the easy to read in case y'all were trying to follow me somewhere. And enjoys making things with her hands. My mother always was working with her hands. She's passed that on to my daughter. My daughter sits around and crochets all the time, even with the sickness and disease. That helps her. When we went to my son's and she was there with us also, she's sitting there with them crochet needles. She's just constantly crocheting, making things. My mother was constantly making things and preparing things. She was a seamstress. She could take and go to the store and see a particular dress. She made all of my sister's clothes until she was grown. She made all of her dresses and everything. She made shirts for me when I was younger. And then when she got older, we got a little older. Y'all remember double knit suits? The old double knit suits? My mother made I don't know how many double knit suits. Matter of fact, my daddy was buried in one of the double knit suits that she made. I wore one. She'd made me one exactly like his. And on that day we had his funeral, I wore the same suit exactly like the one that he was buried in. Our pastor, Brother Staggs, at that time, I don't know how many suits. He had a new suit nearly every week. My mother made suits out of that double knit suits. And so she loved to do these things and make these things and give them to her pastor. She was always busy. She is like a ship from a faraway place. She brings home food from everywhere. My mother would prepare that, would have that garden. And it didn't matter how hot it was. I can still see her down on her knees crawling, gathering them Blue Lake beans. I talked about that. She burned us nearly out on them things, Blue Lake beans. But she would do those things, constantly working, preparing. She brings home the food from everywhere. She wakes up early in the morning, cooks food for her family, and gives the servants their share. Now, we never had any servants. I think as kids was kind of maybe some servants. But she always made sure that we had something to eat. She looks at land and buys it. She uses the money she has earned and plants a vineyard. She works very hard. Like I said a few minutes ago, we didn't have that much money. She was a housewife. She took care of the family. She took care of the home. And my dad never had to worry about things back at the home because she was there taking care of those. I never did finish my story a while ago that I started telling about how I'd get in trouble. I would do ornery things, of course. And I remember that Daddy was fixing to come home, and I'd begin to beg Mama, "Mama, please don't tell Daddy. Please don't." She wouldn't whoop me herself, but I knew he would. "Please don't tell Daddy." Time Daddy got home, I had her talked out. most always I talked her out of it. I didn't get that whooping that I would have got. And he used a belt. He didn't mess around. Like today, he didn't have a razor strap. All the years that I remember my dad, he had an electric razor. He never used I'm sure in his earlier days he did, but when I got old enough to remember anything, he had an electric razor. He always used that. She wakes up early in the morning, cooks food for her family, and gives the servants their share. She looks at the land and buys it. Now, I don't think she ever bought any land. She only bought it with my dad. My dad and mother in about 1967 or 66 or 67, after my grandmother had died, they bought the farm from his brothers and sisters. But as far as buying land, I don't guess she ever bought any. She uses the money she has earned and plants a vineyard. She works very hard. She is strong and able to do all her work. She works late into the night to make sure her business earns a profit. She never earned a profit, on anything. She always gave everything away that she had. I remember her being this seamstress I told you about. She would help others with her sewing. She would make clothes and create stuff like that for them. She makes her own thread and weaves her own cloth. I don't think she ever did that. She always gives to the poor and helps those who need it. She'd always take care of the needy. My mother always had. As she got older, she lived on Social Security altogether. And she didn't draw very much because she drawed a widow's benefits from my dad, and at the beginning it was like $550 a month is what she had to live on. And but by the time she had passed away, every month she saved money. And she'd built up thousands of dollars of money she had built up, or she had me taking care of it for her. She'd give it to me. I realized that if she ever had to go to a nursing home, and y'all remember this, can't have but $2,000 in your bank account if you go to a nursing home, because they'll take it. But she saved. She was able to save her money. She makes clothes and belts and sells them to the merchants. I don't think she ever did that, but she made a lot of clothes and probably made some belts to go in the ladies' clothes. She is a strong person, and people respect her. I don't think anybody that ever knew my mother would ever said anything bad about her, because of the type of life that she lived. She looks to the future with confidence. She speaks with wisdom and teaches others to be loving and kind. I believe that my personality, besides the Holy Spirit working with me, but I believe I got that from my mother. To try to, be easy to a certain extent and calm, and to give to others. Over and over, I have given to others to try to help out. I'm not bragging on myself. I'm bragging on my mama, because she was like that. She was giving. She oversees and cares for her house. She is never lazy. My mother worked until